you all could join. Okay. We're so happy that you can join us for a workshop. And I don't know, like, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Carolina. I work at 46Elk as a developer. And then I have my co-workers with me.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Nina, and been working with the 46Elks 2 years now with finance and community. And today I'm a helping hand for Carolina. So good luck and have fun.
Nice. And hi, my name is Victoria, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat today. So if a question does come up where I might be able to answer in the chat, and I'll try to do that. And if not, then we will help each other out after Carolina's workshop to answer any questions along the way. But absolutely ask questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to help you out as we go.
And I think we should say all the languages we know, or some of them at least. So I speak English, and I speak Swedish, and I speak Norwegian. And Nina and Victoria?
Yes, eli siis mä oon Suomesta ja puhun suomea, eli jos haluaa suomeksi laittaa kysymyksen, niin sekin myöskin sopii.
Brilliant. And I speak English as well, and I speak Polish actually also. So,
you do speak Swedish?
I do speak Swedish, yes.
Så har dere noen spørsmål, så er det bare til å stille dem i chatten. I think we should do this. And the preparations that we had on this page, it was to download and install the Postman client, and then also create a 46Elks account. And if you haven't done that, that's fine. You can just listen in, or you can go to this link here. I think we will post it in the chat. And in case you haven't created your account or downloaded Postman, there's still time to do that as well, in case you want to join in. Because sometimes it's really good to actually do what we're talking about. I know that I feel like that something just clicks when you're actually doing it yourself. So if you want to do that, there's still time to do that. And there was a couple of people that couldn't download Postman to their computer, and that's fine as well, because you can do this from the website, the Postman website. So it should be fine, but sometimes there might be an issue with a GET or a POST request that we're going to do later on when you do it from the website. So it's always easier to have the client downloaded. But it should work fine anyways. And as we all said in different languages, if you have any questions along the way, just ask them in the chat. And in case I speak too fast, or if I go too fast on the computer, just shout out and I can just back it up, and I can show this step again. And if someone doesn't get it to work, we can just meet up afterwards, and we can get it to work as well. So we're gonna post this link in the chat as well. And here's just a couple of handful of resources along the way that we're going to go through and look at and talk about. So it might be good to have the links handy. And I think I'm going to perhaps recruit a colleague to help me talk about why and when to use APIs. So I might ask Victoria for a couple of examples, actually.
I'm all here.
Oh, lovely.
Do you want to start off, or do you want me to go dive right in?
I think I can just speak a little bit about what an API is.
Yeah.
And the actual word API stands for automatic programming interface.
applications
Application.
programmable interface. Yeah.
As you perhaps can see, I'm in Mexico, so my time is 5 in the morning, so my head might not be. Woohoo. Application programming interface, and that's what it stands for. And in the beginning, that didn't mean that much to me, but basically, it's just a connection. So an API is a connection of sorts. So it allows us to speak to an API and us, computers and systems, to speak to an API and extract information or push information in. And we are going to go through, we are going to be using API during this workshop. So we are going to go through slowly what an API is. So if you don't understand it now, it's fine. At the end, hopefully you will know. So Victoria?
Absolutely. And I'll be fairly brief because I'm really looking forward to everyone getting hands-on and actually using an API. That's it becomes real. So just like Carolina was saying, it's letting two systems, for example, talk to each other in an efficient manner. So if there was a company A and a company B and they had systems back in the days, like many years ago, usually for those two systems to talk to each other, it would be meetings and there'd be developers on this side and developers on this side through their managers, and then maybe a salesperson or someone else. They would try to talk to each other a long time. There would be issues and errors. And then when this company A wants to talk to company C system, it's the same thing again. And often custom setups for between these companies. Now with an API, you're saying, hey, my system, this is what it looks like if you want to try to talk to my system. If you just read through this documentation on how our system is, the door into our system, what it looks like, and how you make a request to our system, and what type of response you'll get, you can get started within anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes in many systems, just because there is a standardized setup of how to talk to that system. And that's in general called an API. So that application's programmable interface. So I really like to compare to a door into a system, a digital door in. Now, some examples of when and why this would be relevant besides efficient communication between two systems and different companies, not needing the human interaction just to get it in place. So one is opening up access to data. Now, long time ago, for example, if I wanted to go on a bus ride where I was living, I would I would have this little pamphlet, right? A paper one. And I would see, okay, there's a timetable. The next bus where I live, it goes at about this time. And if there is no bus, well, then there is no bus. And I have no idea if it's coming late or if it's just not coming, or, no idea, right? But somewhere along the line, we then started tracking buses, and there is a big, nice system that knows where all the buses are and so on. Now, that data that's available in the big general system, it can then be accessed, for example, in a big, nice screen next to my bus stop. That's one system that's extracting data from the main database with information about all the buses. I might also have an app that has the same information, right? And there might be screens next to the central station. All of these different units, whether it's an app or a website or a nice screen that's on my bus stop, for them to easily talk to this one central system where there's lots of data, having an API, a layer in, makes a huge difference and makes it really easy for us as developers to build exactly what we want. Another example is back in the days, if I wanted data, say, from municipality, right? I want data on how the forest is doing and different measurements on, for example, fruits and vegetables in our stores when we're importing fruits and vegetables. How bad is the toxic chemicals that are being used? There are checks being done, right? So back in the days, if I wanted data on anything that's a fairly big amount, I would have perhaps emailed someone and gotten a PDF back, or maybe someone emailed me a CSV and I'd have to walk through all that data. With an API setup, I can just access that data and get exactly what I want and use filters and stuff to get it. Yeah, I'll stop there for open access to data. Automation is also really key. So it goes back to the first point. Like if I have to ask a human being for information, or if, for example, I sell my car and I have to send in a piece of paper to the authorities to say, hey, this person bought my car. I'm no longer the owner of this car. This person owns my car now. And someone has to manually add that into a system. Then there's old data. Like that person has already bought my car, but the system might not be updated until 3 days later. So automation is possible thanks to APIs. Now in Sweden, there's an app. I scan the purchasing person's driver's license. I scan my driver's license. We both register and validate our IDs. And then boom, automatically, no manual labor has gone into updating the system with the information about this purchase and the switching of who's owning this vehicle. So that's one example of many, and I would love to talk more about different examples after Carolina's gone through the steps of how to use an API, and if you have any questions. And the third one is, it says layer on top of complexity. So within the banking system, within the medical system, there are many both machines and systems that are quite old, same as with telecom. And you're not going to go, hey, let's just stop banking for a day or 3 and let's fix and update these things. It has to keep running. So, and this is actually a joke that goes around quite a bit, like, oh, you want to hire someone who's working on this banking system? Yeah, you have to look at someone's like 65 or plus, because no one's learning these things anymore. So many systems now, people have been putting a layer on top of that complex system that makes it easy for us who are using modern quote unquote languages. If you're using PHP, Elixir, Java, JavaScript like Node, Python, it doesn't matter which programming language you're using. You can directly talk to the system through this API layer, and then behind the API, the system works in its own way and does what you need. So that would be the part about having a layer on top of complexity and making it easily accessible. And that, I mean, that's what we do. That's why we can share this really cool thing that Carolina will be going through with you. So telco, telephony infrastructure, it's telephony specific code, so to speak. And it would take quite some time for everyone who wants to integrate telephony to learn telephony specific technology. But when we've got an API on top of that, I can be just quote unquote a web developer and do all these cool websites, and I can talk to the telephony infrastructure, and I don't have to know telephony. Yep, I'll stop there for now.
I can listen to this all day because there's so many examples of like what you can do with data and in an actual API then. So these are some of the words that we're going to go through during the workshop. So it's URL, request, response, status codes, docs, get and post, authentication, format as JSON, XML, for example, and a bit about open data as well. So URL is an address out on the internet. So exactly as I or everybody here has a home address, a URL is exactly the same thing out on the internet. So you have a home address where someone goes to knock on your door, and that's basically like when we're accessing a website. So I think we're going to do this. We can go to this URL out on the internet. It's 46elks.se/hey in Swedish. And we can just have a look at what's on this website. And we're going to look add it as you see it now, where it says Välkommen hit, it says welcome here. And then we're going to actually be looking at what's going on behind this. And that's just sort of a like easy way to introduce ourselves to Postman as well. So I'm going to copy this URL and we're going to go into Postman. And it might look a bit different, like depending where you are in Postman. So we're just going to have a sneak peek. It might look like this at the beginning. And then you see down here at the bottom, you can just click skip and go to the app. And if you have an account, that's fine as well. If you have an account, it might look like this when you're starting out. And you can just like, there's a lot of things happening in Postman as it is in systems today. They want to talk about things. We're going to just make it clean and easy to work with. So you can just press this plus button here and you should get something that looks like this. And it's also, it should be possible to just drag and like clean it up a bit. And we copied the URL and we're going to paste it into Postman. And we're going to have a look at what's going on this website. I think I'm actually going to make it a bit smaller so I can see the whole thing. Like that. And in Postman, you just copy the URL. It says get over here. You don't have to know what it's about right now, but we just press send. And then we get the response down here. And please let me know if you can't see my screen, then I can try and like make it larger. So this is what's going on behind the scenes on this website. And this is an easy way of figuring that out as well. Going into Postman, and we just made our first GET request. So we went to this door and we knocked on the door and we got a response from it. We still haven't used an API, but we are going to do something similar with an API as well. So this is what's going on behind the scenes on a website. A website can be this full. And what we're seeing here is the HTML code on the website. So a different example of this is if you do it like this. So I have Chrome. So I just right click and get, I can't remember what it's called in English, site something, site source, something, source code.
View source.
View source,
So you right click and do view source.
View source. And this is what we're actually seeing as well. So it's the same in Postman as it is in Chrome. This is all that's on this website. So we have knocked on the door and we got somebody saying, hello, this is what my home looks like. And that's all, basically. So a GET request is to ask for data. We are also going to do a POST request where we're sending data in, but that comes a bit later as well. Okay, so now we're actually going to be looking at an API, and we're going to be looking at the API that we're working with because it's easy to use in this workshop. So if you go to 46alts.se or .com or .fe, and you go to documentation, I can actually have this in English, so we're saying the same thing. So we go to overview, and here we can see that there's something called an base URL to an API, and that's the case with an API. Just as any website out on the internet or web shop or something, an API has an URL as well. And this is the base URL of the 46alts API. So we're going to copy that as well, and we're going to paste it into the chat, so you can copy it from there as well. We're just going to copy that, and we're going to do the same thing in Postman, that we're going to replace this URL and we're going to paste this one in, and we can press send. And here it says API access requires basic HTTP authentication, read documentation or examples. And we are on the documentation, and if you wasn't in the workshop, then you had to read the documentation in order to understand how to talk to this API. But now we're in a workshop together, so we're going to do this together as well. We are going to, during this workshop, we are going to be sending an SMS. So that's why I'm going into the documentation to send an SMS. And we're going to be using an endpoint at our URL as well. But first, we're going to do what it tells us to do. So in Postman here, it tells us that we have to authenticate ourselves in order to speak to this API. So that's what we're going to do. And then you click in Postman, then you click authorization, the little tag, menu choice.
Yeah, Carolina, can I jump in with a quick comment?
Yeah, of course.
So you were saying before that people have a home address on the internet when you have a website. And I'm repeating what you were saying before, like, oh, we went to the address, home address of api.46elks.com/a1. That is our home address, this API's home address.
Yeah.
So if you are going to be using other APIs out there, they will be having their own home address. And now when we were knocking on the door, it was locked. Before we were knocking on the door and we got something back. So the door was open. And now with the authorization Carolina is going through, it's like you can imagine you're knocking on the door and it's locked.
And we were going to grab our keys and unlock the door in order to get in. That's such a good analogy. I love that. So we're going to click authorization, and then we're going to click type here. And then we're going to choose, just as it tells us, basic auth. And we click that, and it shouldn't be looking like this in my Postman. It should be looking like this, because this is what it looks like for you guys as well. And then we're going to log on to our 46elks account. I should probably mention as well, when speaking to an API and trying to locate the information, it could be named different things. So it could be named API docs or API documentation or reference manual or API manual. It has a lot of different names, but there should always be some sort of like instruction book on how to speak to this specific API, because it can be different. But now we're going to log on to our 46elks account. And when you do that, it should look like this. You come to the dashboard, and then we just scroll down. And down here at the bottom, you can see API credentials. This is where it gets tricky sometimes, because here it says in Postman, it can be named username and password. And that's not the same thing as when you log on to your 46elks account. So when you log on to your 46elks account, you have your email and you have a password. That's not what we're going to post here. It's the API credentials or the API keys. And those are, if you know it, they're easy to find because they're often made up of numbers and letters, and they look something like this. So we're just going to post this, copy. We're going to copy this and we're going to post it into Postman. Oh, I got a bit too much information here. And you can actually see in Postman when there's a mistake happening. So I accidentally got like a lot of spaces and things.
Yeah, Carolina, can you make a space after the 7 so we can show what a dot looks like?
Yeah.
And Oh, I can barely see it on your screen,
yeah.
but can you see a dot?
I can see it. It's like tiny light gray dot, and that's what it looks like in case you accidentally got like a space after your information. So you can just remove that because it's sensitive. And then we're going to copy. I'm sorry. Then we're going to copy the password as well, and we're gonna paste it in here. And we press send again and see what happens. And now it says, hello there, you authenticated correctly. Read documentations or examples for further information on how to use the platform. So we unlocked the door, we got in.
Oh,
And
and
yeah.
I would like to mention something before you move on to, I see where you're going.
Yeah.
So right now we're using Postman to authenticate ourselves, to unlock the door into an API. At the end of this workshop, we'll give you a link to a place where you can get multiple code examples of how you can do exactly the same thing that Carolina is doing now within different programming languages.
Yeah, that's good that you mention it as well, because we are developers and not everybody is a developer. So Postman is a really good way of understanding an API and just getting a feel for what is it, how can I use it? And then of course you can use it in code as well and in different languages. So also worth mentioning here in Postman, when talking to API, you're going to get status codes along the way. And those status codes can be different things. But here it says 200 OK. And that means, yeah, you got the answer that you can get. So everything is fine. But always when you do like a get or a post request or something, you're trying to give or get information or data, you're going to get different status codes depending on, have I done something correctly or do I need to do something different, or like, this is the answer that you can get. Okay, perfect. And there are 4 different groups of status codes worth mentioning. And we're actually gonna have a look at my favorite website. I think it should be linked here, perhaps. There. So we have the 4 groups. It's to something. It means basically, yeah, okay, you have gotten the answer that you can get. Everything is fine. You've done it correctly. And then we have 3 something. It could be 301, 302, 303. It's here, but it's somewhere else. You have to dig around a bit. It's not here anymore. And then you have 4 something. You're not doing something correctly. So before we got our API credentials, we would have gotten a 401 status code where it says that we haven't authenticated. We're not allowed to go in this door. We actually have to unlock it before.
Can you show us in Postman?
Yes, I can. So this is what it would be looking like if we don't unlock the door. We get a 401 authorization required. And it's not scary, as we just unlocked the door. It just says, oh, you need your keys. Perfect. And then we have also 5 something, and that's where, like, of these 4 groups, then we have 5 something. We have made a mistake. We apologize. Please just let us know, call us, email us, just tell us that something's wrong, or try a bit later. And this is my favorite website, HTTP cat. And it says all of the status codes, but it does it with images of cats, which I love. So this is a good way of actually like reminding yourself what status code is for, because you can see there's a lot of status codes. And it's a good tool actually to be looking at in order to learn the different status codes. And that might come in handy when you're coding as well. Like you want to tell your code what to do when you get this and this status code. And I'm just gonna log on again to Postman. Like that. And we got the 200. Okay. So we've done that correctly. And we're gonna look at this list here as well. So we have gone through a couple of things. What we're going to do next is that we're going to, up until now, we have done only get requests. Now we're going to do a post request instead. So what we're going to do in Postman is over here, you can see where it says get. We're going to change that into post. And if you click send now, you get still the same answer. So we're going to do a couple of more things. So if you click body here in Postman, and you click X www form URL encoded, that's just a format. So it's a very long name. So if you click that, you get a key and you get value. And in JavaScript, there's like you often talk about the key value pair. A key is just sort of like a headline, basically. And value is the information to that headline. So for instance, you could write something like address, and I live in Stockholm. That's the value on the headline in this case. Or you could write the name, and my name is Carolina. And those are like a key value pair. You have a headline and then you have information specific to me. And then you pair those two together. But that's not what we're going to do here. So we are going to do this. We are going to write in the first key, we're going to write 2. And then we can write our own cell phone number. So I'm going to write mine, and you have to do it in country code. And in Sweden, it's +46, hence 46 Elks, because we're based in Sweden. So I'm going to write my cell phone number, and you write your own cell phone number, but you have to do it in country code format. Am I going too fast, Victoria?
I hope and I think you're absolutely fine and just enough. I'm getting a few questions in the chat, so I'm trying to answer people's questions as you're going at the same time. Nina, what is the prefix for Finland? Usually +3 85 58 +3 58. Nice. We actually have a colleague in Croatia who had, and in Croatia it's 385. So I mix absolutely up Finland and Croatia every single day. Dear Renee. So your number, whatever your phone number, mobile phone number is, it removes the 0 in the beginning and then add a +358 instead of the 0.
If you have a Finnish cell phone number.
Right, yes.
I have a Swedish one, so I'm going to type in mine. So 3853. And then the next key is from. And here you could, normally when you're sending an SMS, it's a cell phone number to a cell phone number. But we are going to use an API, so we could be doing this as well. We could be sending SMS from a cell phone number to a cell phone number. But since we're using this API, we can also use a text sender. And if you want to use like a text sender, it has to be a minimum of 3 characters and maximum 11 characters. So we could type in workshop, for example. And then we have the last key, and the last key is message. And this is where the value of message is where what's going to be in the SMS. We are live in workshop. That's what I'm going to type. And when you've done this, you have a to key and you have a value in that. That's your cell phone number with the country code at the beginning, the prefix. And then you have a key that says from, and you have either a text sender or you have text sender. It's easier. And then you have a key that says message, and that's the actual information in the SMS. And then you press send. We're still getting this response. Oh, sorry. I mentioned this from the beginning. This happens to all of us when coding or doing something on the internet. We make mistakes. We're all human, and I just made a mistake. So when we, I mentioned this before, in docs, send an SMS. In this case, this is what we're going to do. I see Victoria laughing. So this is what we want to do. I just mentioned this quickly before. We have the base URL, and when you want to do different actions in an API, there might be different endpoints. And in this case, we want to send an SMS, so we have to add the endpoint SMS. And the endpoint in this case looks like this. It's a slash and it says SMS. And that's what we're going to have to add into Postman in our base URL in order to send an SMS. But it's good to see that people can make mistakes.
And I'd like to add to what Carolina was saying now that imagine you're knocking on the API door and you get into the main house. Then inside that system or the house, you might have different rooms where you can do different things. So adding, for example, the endpoint SMS that you're adding now, Carolina, in Postman, you can imagine it as, okay, I've gotten into the system, I'm in the house. Where do I want to go and what do I want to do? Oh, I'm going through the SMS door, and these are all the things I can do in here.
Yeah, exactly like that. Such a good analogy still. So we're just going to add SMS at the last slash, and then we can press send again and see what happens. So we got, just as we did before the first time, we got a response from Postman. And here it says status created, direction outgoing, and we can also see the key value pair that we added into Postman. You can see them lurking about here. So we have from, and we have to, and we have message, and every SMS gets an ID as well. So hopefully, if you've done it as I did now, and if you've managed to keep up, you should have also gotten a SMS to your phone. Oh, sorry.
And I'll add, I see questions coming in where they only get data and bracket. So that those of you who get only, I just get data, you need to change from get to post. So Carolina, can you show?
Over here in Postman, you just click here, and from the beginning it looks like this, but then you click it and you replace it to post. And the reason for doing this, before we've been doing get request, we've been knocking on the door and we've been getting information from that house. But now we want to post information. We want to give them something in return. So that's what we're choosing post.
I know we were saying back in the days, like, oh, can I get the salt, please?
Yeah.
When I want to get something. And then I'm sending a post, like I'm going to the post office to send something. So that was a post request. I know, please explain, Json has come up.
Yeah, of course. So over here, it's almost easier to be looking at this. Over here, you can see the two different formats. We have JSON and we have XML. In Postman, the answer that we got now is a JSON format answer. It's quite easy on the eyes, it's quite readable, and it's the same with XML, but it just looks different. So in this case, we got a response from Postman. It's in the format of JSON, and it looks like this. Before, do you remember at the beginning, we knocked on a door at the 46x.se/hey as well. And it might have looked something like this instead. So this is the XML format. And here you have, just as we did before, it looks a bit more like HTML code in my eyes. You have to have what is it called? I can't remember the name. You have to
Brackets?
like brackets. Thank you. You have to have your like key. You have to have it around your value. In JSON, it looks a bit different. So you have key, and then you have colon, and then you have your value within the dubbelfnuttar. We call them in Swedish.
Quotation marks?
Quotation marks. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Do you have something to add about JSON and XML format, Victoria?
I do.
Yeah.
I would say XML is a standard that was implemented and recognized long before JSON was a thing. So in many old systems, you're not going to find JSON because it wasn't invented yet when that system was built. And also XML, you see, it's quite familiar to HTML code. Like it's the same, it stems from the same base. So I would say if you're building an API in the future, if you're using XML, then it's very likely that all or most systems can talk to you. If you're doing it JSON, well, then there might be an issue with integrations with older systems, something to just be aware of and know that that's the thing. Now, and on the other hand, though, with JSON, you see that there's brackets and then there's curly brackets. Like there's two different ones. Like the first one, it's a list with values. The first one, it says list with values. So it's a value, 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 and there are no keys, right? So for example, if you're saying, I want all the names of all the animals that live in this forest, and you must just get fox, rabbit, and so on. But you know what you're asking for, so you're just getting a bunch of values. With JSON and an object, as it's called, you see that there's a key and there's the value. So here's animal, fox, and then it might be second animal, rabbit. And when using XML, when using JSON, I know if there's a list coming, it can be one or multiple items on that list. Also with an object, I know it can be one or multiple key value pairs on that. With XML, you don't know if it's like if there can be multiple ones, if it could always just be one thing in the response you're getting. I'm thinking of I was working on a project, and it was a subcontractor of a subcontractor of a subcontractor for Ericsson, and there was this thing with nodes that you wanted to be connecting. And long story short, the specs, the details that the developers were getting, like, hey, this is what the response will look like, and it was in XML. And so then everybody built the code to interact with that system. But then like, oh, wait, there was 3 values here, which would have been obvious if it had been in JSON with an array with a list of values, because, it can be one or multiple values. But with XML, it's really easy to like assume it's just going to be one value. So XML, XML is both relevant for modern services and old ones, but you won't be finding JSON for old systems. And JSON is absolutely, if you're coding in Node, JSON is usually the format that you're sending data back and forth in. So anyone who's been coding anything with JavaScript, you're quite familiar with arrays and objects, like the first two in JSON.
Perfect. Are there any more questions?
Please submit your questions to the chat. And I can't think of any more questions. Right here. There's a too long alphanumeric from number. Max length is 11 characters.
Yes.
Do you want to explain it?
Oh, why? Sorry. Actually, the why I'm a bit uncertain of. I just know the how. So it should be like when you're doing alphanumeric text sender, you have to have a minimum of 3 characters and a maximum of 11 characters. And that's also in the documentation. You should always see like when you want to do it. I'm actually not sure where here.
From.
Yeah, from.
It's right there, from.
Yeah. So it says in here as well, like how to use alphanumeric text sender.
And just to also, when Carolina is saying alphanumeric text sender, it's the same thing as putting in a word instead of a phone number in the from. So can you show it in Postman?
Yeah.
And then add too many letters. And then hit send.
And here.
And there we go. And that's the same too long alphanumeric.
And as we were talking about before, status codes, status codes, status codes, status codes. When you're talking to an API, this is like your biggest help along the way. Am I getting the right response? Have I done it correctly? What does this mean? Like this often sometimes in Postman or in code, like it doesn't say that much. But you have the documentation, like your instruction manual to the API in case you've done something that gives you the wrong answer. And here we get actually quite a helpful message from Postman, but also then you have status codes. Check the status code.
Nice. Nice, nice. And the next question is, I just get invalid key name when I try to hit send.
Invalid key name, what can that be then?
So if you change the from to fromily, like make something up.
Yeah.
And then hit send. You get
invalid key. Yeah. So you might have just gotten like a space in between, before or after or in the middle of something.
Yeah, but also the message was invalid key name. So I'm guessing, let's see, Koodaa, that you might have put in name instead of to from a message.
Yeah, I was showing before. So here in Postman, you can add as many keys and values as you want. And I was showing before, I was adding name and my name, Carolina, as a value. So if you look around here, you might have gotten just one extra key. And it's fine, you can just remove it like that. Nice. And it should be working.
I hope that works for you, Noora. And then I see here, I would like to know what's the difference between raw and binary and GraphQL and XWW form URL, etc. Can I take that one?
Yes, please.
So raw means here's data, you figure out what you want to do with it. Basically, if you create a text file using any editor where you would perhaps usually write code or just a very basic text file, raw lines of information, anything. There's no structure like with the JSON or XML. You're just like, here's data, do with it what you want. That's a raw format. So that's the first one. And then we've got the binary means you're sending it in the format just as computers are talking to each other in binary format, like it's ones and zeros is what you're getting, and then it's up to you to use to translate that into bits and bytes and so on. And then with WW form URL encoded, so APIs that we've been talking about in this workshop, it's all about web APIs. So it's APIs that are accessible over the internet through the same web standards as websites. Now, form URL encoded, once upon a time, and it's the same technology today, if you made a form that's available on a website, for example, a contact form, you write a message, here's my email, hit send, the format of that data that's then submitted over the internet, usually with a post request, that format is the same one as we've been using today to send data, just as you would send data from a form on a website into a system in a service. You can then work with an API if this is the format that API is expecting. That's the same format. And then we've got GraphQL, which means so RESTful APIs, where you might, for example, be using form URL encoded formatting. You can go here, hey, I would like to ask for all numbers that are on my account. Then you hit /numbers, and then you get a response back with all your numbers. When you're using GraphQL, you can say, hey, I would like all my numbers, and here's a bit of data which filters the response that I would like, so that in the system, you can make the filtering and then only send me the little piece of the response I want back, instead of giving me everything, and I then have to filter it out afterwards. That's a short enough description of the base general overview. It's a bit of a simplistic view on it, but that's a overview. I see someone was writing 2 with a capital T, and that's correct. That does not work. You need to have small case, lowercase.
It's case sensitive, and that often happens to me in code as well. Like sometimes my muscle memory is off, so I write things with like a capital or something. I write a big letter somewhere, and often code is case sensitive in many cases. In many cases, pun not intended.
And Virpi, I see now your error, and it says 46 ELS. You're missing a K in the URL, so elks.se. So I hope that helps you, Virpi. And any more questions? Can you just shortly explain again, what does your API do?
Oh, so our API 46 elks. We have a SMS and telephony API. So we have basically taken the telephone grid, perhaps, and cell phones, and actually, does anybody remember landlines anymore? I might be a bit too old. But we have taken all of that, like sort of older kind of communication, and we have taken it into to the new digital era. It sounds so fancy when I say it like that, but it's a good way of explaining it. We have made everything that was possible with the landline and the cell phone. We have made it possible to do digitally. So we could actually, we can be looking at the documentation. This is almost a more accurate description of all the things that we can be doing with our API. So we can be sending an SMS, we could be receiving, we could be sending an MMS, or we could be making a phone call as well. So we could be making phone calls from our computer, just as perhaps someone has noticed with FaceTime. Sort of like that, but you can do it with code.
Yeah, and I'd like to add 2 things to what Carolina is saying. So, for example, one thing is we're making automation possible. Like anything you can do with your phone, you can now write code that does the same thing. So imagine like, oh, here's a heads up to 100 people in your company. You don't have to sit and write 100 text messages to every person. You can just write a short script, run it, and then it triggers that message to 100 people, for example. So automation and making this technology of telephony accessible to any web developer, compared to back in the days when you had to know how telco infrastructure works. And honestly, a lot of people are not even going to get access to telco infrastructure, but that's a whole different story. Let's show code examples of how we can use APIs with any programming language where we can have examples of. So if you go to the documentation. Oh, there, you were, yeah.
Exactly.
Nice.
I wanted to remember that we have it here. So on GitHub, in case you are familiar with GitHub, just starting out, you might not be, but it might be a good way of getting familiarized with GitHub as well. We have a 46 Elks getting started GitHub. And here you have not all perhaps, but
Many.
a lot of code examples. So my starting out was HTML and CSS and PHP, for instance. Those are the languages that I'm most familiar with. But then you also have Python and Ruby and Java. And here you have a GitHub repository.
Yep.
With a lot of code examples in case you want to code something with our API.
And can you go to the Python example?
Yep.
So what we did just now through Postman was Carolina was showing you, you make an API request, you're posting in data, you're using parameters, which are to, from, and message, and submitting that to the system through an API. Now, if you hit Python send SMS.py, I think it's the last one.
Yep.
This is a few lines of code in the programming language Python that does exactly the same thing as Carolina did with Postman. And then imagine if you have a list of 1,000 phone numbers, you can run through that list in your code and then have it do the same thing.
And a really good thing with GitHub, in case you're not familiar with this from the beginning, you can always just copy this information. If you don't know how to fork it and have it on your own GitHub, then you can just copy the information and you can use it in VS Code, in brackets, in Vim, whatever you're most familiar with, your text editor of choice.
And now that you've got an idea of how APIs work in general, and you're familiar with lots of terminology, if you look at this code example, and Carolina, can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah.
So imagine you want to be talking to our API or any other API. If you see on line 15, that's the URL that we were manually putting into Postman. So you can change that to any API or any endpoint. So for example, you could change SMS to MMS, to phone numbers or phone or calls, or you could change the whole thing to Instagram API or some other API. And then when you see the fields, line 8 to 12, look through that API, whichever API you want to use. What are the parameters you want to be submitting? And then you change the key and value pair to whatever API you want to be using. And then if the API you're trying to use is using basic auth, then lines 4 and 5, you would change it to your API credentials for that specific API. And then you're on your way. You're this close to coding with APIs.
It feels like letting people go crazy and just knocking on all the doors and unlocking all the doors. But that's basically what it is. So if you want to talk to, just as Victoria said, if you have a different API you want to be using and you're coding in Python, and Python is really accessible in this case, this is just the little lines of code, and then you're on your way. Are there any more questions? Do we have time for more questions?
Yes, do we have time for more questions? I'm going to say yes until they stop us.
Yeah.
So if I missed a question, can you please post it again? Otherwise, I don't think there might not be any more questions.
It feels like we can be talking
I would
about
like
this
to
all.
understand how, I know, I need this to understand how our library system and its APIs work. Great help, thanks. So you're getting
Awesome.
thanks. That's lovely. Can you have a follow-up workshop? Yes, we'd love
Yes,
to
of
have a follow-up
course.
workshop. Really clear presentation. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Inspiring info, learn a lot.
So since we have a Mimmit Koodaa Slack, I suggest that we could open the API channel there. So if you attendees are feeling that you want to have more discussions and maybe we should plan new workshop around this, just send me a message and I'll perustan sen Slack-kanavan and then let's meet there again.
Lovely. I wonder what the second workshop should be about.
There's so much we can do. And also there's, if you search in your DuckDuckGo or Google, whichever you want, you can do like, for example, Finland and open data. And then you might find lots of interesting data that's accessible through API. So we could maybe be looking at open data through an API next time, or we could be making phone calls next time. There's lots of fun to be doing. Or we could actually be using Vim and we can do some coding.
Yeah.
We could do this in Python and in PHP and in Node. That would be amazing.
Or setting up
someone's asking for the material. Can you submit a link to a page with the summary that you were going through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, actually. Like that.
Perfect. Nice. And you're getting lots of requests for a follow-up workshop. Nice, Carolina.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think there are any more questions coming in.
And if it is, do we have our contact information available?
So let's put it in the chat. All right, so there was a question, can we keep our accounts and can we keep the credits we've got on our accounts?
Yes, of course. That's just our little goodie bag in case you want to go exploring our API. Go ahead. Just go nuts, go crazy. You have GitHub, you have the documentation, and also on our website in case there's something you want to try. We have a lot of guides and tutorials as well. And just let all of us know in case you have any questions or if you get stuck somewhere.
Oh, and also if you have, I imagine there will be people who might be listening to this after we've done this workshop.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe someone you're talking to on Slack. So just tell them to let us know that, it's through Mimmit Koodaa, and then we'll make sure they get credits as well so they can play and do the exact follow the steps.
Yeah, of course. Awesome.
There was one. Okay, so I will send 1st of April message to my colleagues this spring.
As long as it's within reason. So this is a challenge for us actually, because we're opening up telephony. So for example, if you try to send a message from the police, not okay. And it's always a balance of how do we make it really easy for people to do really cool and good things, but also make sure, just like you in this workshop had to throw out people just to make sure that it's a safe space, we have that same requirement on our shoulders to make sure no one's abusing telephony, because you can imagine what the damage you can wreak by having access to automating telephony. So be smart about your jokes.
Yeah, don't bend the rules too much. And in case you do, we're going to let you know. But build and
we'll throw you out and we'll have to have lots of management internally.
But up until that, build cool stuff, send fun messages. That's totally fine.
This is actually, our community is really reasonable. They do have a humor and they know how to do intelligent jokes. So we are trusting them.
Nice.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Our pleasure. Yeah, thank you for participating.
So are we ready to move on weekend? I know that Carolina's is now at, what's the time? 6 at the morning?
Yes, it is. So I'm gonna
Thank you
go
for
up to the
joining
pool.
us. Thank you for joining us so early.
No
And
worries.
have a lovely time there wherever you are. And hello, peeps. Let's have a nice weekend and take care of yourself. See you in Slack and community events later. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Victoria, Carolina, all attendees, Riikka, and see you later.
Yes, thank